The Cubs beat the Royals yesterday 7-3 in a game that featured Christopher Morel being pulled from the game and having to go on goodbye watch, hugging his teammates as he is sent to the Tampa Bay Rays and the Cubs acquire Isaac Paredes from the Tampa Bay Rays. That and more on this edition of the Cubs Baseball Channel, recapping a crazy day for the Chicago Cubs. Make sure to like and subscribe. Get in that comment section. Let us know how you feel about the trade and how you feel about this team moving forward. Here is your invitation to our show. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Cubs Baseball Channel. My name is Anthony Pasquale. You can find me on Twitter at ant_Pasquale3. I've been very busy on there the last couple of days, especially talking about the Isaac Paredes trade that the Cubs just made, acquiring one of the best third basemen in baseball, an all-star, and bringing him to a team that has been looking for a third baseman. And I'm going to give you my thoughts on that trade, but we've got to talk about the fact that the Cubs just won a series against one of the better teams in the American League. The Cubs beat the Royals yesterday. 7-3 was the score. And the Cubs had a pretty big offensive showing for the second day in a row. After scoring 9 runs in the first 7 games coming off the All-Star break, the Cubs have scored 16 in the last 2. And honestly, Patrick Wisdom was a huge reason why. He hit that grand slam on Saturday. He also homered yesterday, which was a nice insurance ad for the Cubs. Pete Crow-Armstrong had 3 hits and was very active in the ball game. Michael Busch came off the bench and delivered 2 knocks as well. Nico Horner drove in a pair of runs too, and Christian Bethancourt made his Cubs debut and knocked a pair of hits as well. So a good game all around for the Cubs offense, but there's one part of the offense that needs to be addressed. Christopher Morel. He was taken out of the game after 1 at-bat and was giving his teammates hugs because Jeff Passan was the first to report that the Cubs had acquired Isaac Paredes from the Tampa Bay Rays, one of the better third basemen in the league, and they were waiting to see what the return was. And then all of a sudden you hear that Christopher Morel is heading to Tampa, who they were interested in over the offseason in talks for Tyler Glasnow, as well as Hunter Bigge and pitching prospect Ty Johnson. So that's the haul that goes to Tampa Bay. The Cubs get a member who was part of their farm system a while back. Back in 2017, the Cubs made a trade. Paredes and Jeimer Candelario sent them to the Tigers for Justin Wilson and Alex Avila. Now, years down the road, last year, the Cubs acquired Candelario before the trade deadline. This year, they acquire Paredes before the trade deadline. So they get a familiar face back in the system, but he's better than the Cubs ever thought he could be. So here's the official trade. Paredes to the Cubs. The Rays get Christopher Morel and 2 prospects. Let's talk about Paredes. His slash line is better than Morel. He's got 16 homers and 55 RBIs. And let's just say it how it is. Better average, better on-base percentage, higher slugging percentage. He has more runs driven in. He's got a better slugging percentage, like I mentioned. He's a better defender, and he has a position at third base. It seems like a slam dunk move for the Cubs. Now, obviously, it makes sense why the Tampa Bay Rays would be interested in Morel. They're an organization that is so forward-thinking in terms of analytics, and Christopher Morel has eye-popping numbers for some categories. He swings harder than anybody. His bat speed is in like the 97th percentile in baseball. And he kind of profiles as like the opposite type of hitter as Paredes is. Morel hits the ball very hard and swings very hard, which is something I think the Rays think that they can harness and turn him into a 30 to 40 home run superstar without losing some of the other parts of the offensive game that the Cubs have lost. Because, you know, you can hit 18 homers like he has this year, but when you're hitting 198, 199, you're just not as productive as you should be, especially in that 4 spot. And I think Jed Hoyer also realized that because Morel doesn't really have a position, he has struggled in the outfield, struggled at third base, that you give yourself a little bit more flexibility when you're not hamstrung to Morel at the DH spot. So the Rays get a guy that they're going to be very excited about. They also get relief pitcher Hunter Bigge and pitching prospect Ty Johnson. But when you look at this trade for the Rays, they think that they can turn Morel into that superstar that the Cubs hoped he would be. Now, when you look at this trade for the Cubs, it looks like Paredes is a lower risk, higher reward version of Christopher Morel. He's a better defender, so the Cubs have third base on lock. And now, as you look at that, it gives the Cubs some flexibility offensively. I think it means that Seiya Suzuki is probably going to be your designated hitter more often, especially because of some of the struggles we've seen out in right field. Once Cody Bellinger is healthy, assuming they don't trade him, he'll be back in the outfield, center, or right, depending on the days that Pete Crow-Armstrong starts or comes off the bench potentially. It also gives the Cubs more leeway to see what you have with Pete Crow-Armstrong, with Kevin Alcantara, with Alexander Canario once he's back and healthy, potentially even with Owen Casey down the stretch. It opens up more of an opportunity for him. It also gives the Cubs some ability to not put guys that they wouldn't like in the lineup just because the defense is better than Christopher Morel. I'm not saying that David Bote and Miles Mastrobuoni don't deserve roles on this team, but I think we can both agree that they're not starters. And now that Paredes is your starting third baseman, Bote can come in and face lefties when need be. Patrick Wisdom can do the same. Miles Mastrobuoni can be a pinch runner. He could start against a righty if you need him to. But with Morel at third base, late in the game, you put in a Mastrobuoni or a Bote, you lose Morel's bat. You get those guys coming up in big spots, and they're not always the guys you want up. Paredes, you could start him and keep him at third base for 9 innings. That's what you get out of him. And he's a good bat, hits some power. He's a heavy pull hitter, so we'll see how that ends up playing at Wrigley Field. But I got to say, I was shocked by the move, but I think it's a good move for the Cubs. And Jed Hoyer said his sights are on 2025 and beyond. This is a move that not only makes your team better today, but makes your team better next year and beyond. So I'm excited to see him in the lineup. I imagine he'll be in the lineup as soon as today against the Reds, if not tomorrow. I assume he'll bat fifth or second would be my guess. My first thought was Horner 1, Bush 2, Suzuki 3, Happ 4, and Paredes 5. And then once Cody Bellinger is back, Bellinger 3, Suzuki 4, Happ 5, or Paredes 6, or flip him with Happ. It'll be interesting. I'm excited to see him back in a Cubs uniform, and I'm excited to see what he can do and what else Jed Hoyer might do at this season's trade deadline. The Cubs already have made a few moves. They got a reliever. They got Paredes, but there's more on the way, I assume. Mike Tauchman, Nico Horner, Mark Leiter Jr., Hector Neris, Drew Smiley, Jameson Taillon. He's our starting pitcher tonight for the Cubs as they take on the Reds. Could this be his last start in the Cubs uniform? I guess we'll find out. He's 7-5 on the year with a 2.96 ERA going up against Carson Spears of the Reds, who's just 3-2 with a 3.83 ERA. So Cubs take on the Reds this week. They've moved a little bit. They're 10 back in the NL Central, 5 back in the wild card race now with a 7.2% chance to make the playoffs, up from last week's 3.5% chance and a 2.4% chance to win the NL Central. But the big news of yesterday, aside from the fact that the Cubs beat the Royals and won a series behind big days from Patrick Wisdom, Pete Crow-Armstrong, and Michael Busch, is that the Cubs acquire Isaac Paredes from the Tampa Bay Rays in exchange for Christopher Morel, Hunter Bigge, and Ty Johnson. Guys, thank you so much for tuning into the Cubs baseball channel. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, and on TikTok. We're going to be very active on there, especially as the trade deadline is coming up tomorrow and the Cubs take on the Reds tonight. So make sure to like and subscribe. Get in that comment section. Let us know how you feel about the trade. Let us know who you think might be next, and if you trust Jed Hoyer to get the job done at this year's deadline. But for now, go Cubs. We'll talk to you soon.